Hey guys, tonight we slip into a world that never quite wakes up. Not fully, not sharply, and definitely not with a smile. You're wrapped in a heavy wool blanket that smells faintly of tallow and lavender, staring at the wooden beams above your head as a distant church bell tolls again. It's either 3 in the morning or 6. Hard to say when the tower rings, like it's paid by the clang. Outside your shuttered window, the Renaissance is just beginning to stir. Not with explosions of enlightenment or sweeping declarations of humanism, but with grumpy peasants rolling over monks, fumbling for sandals in the dark, and city watchmen yawning so loudly the pigeons scatter. You're not rushing to paint a fresco or write a sonnet tonight. No, you're waking up because somebody somewhere decided it was time. And you have no idea why. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The Renaissance didn't start with genius. It started with grogginess and a lot of bells. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Because honestly, someone out there is probably watching this at 3:17 a.m. after a weird dream about Roman aqueducts and missing socks. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge down the narrow alleyways of 15th century Florence torchlight, flickering against stone walls. Somewhere a baker is already stoking the oven. A friar mutters prayers with one eye open. And above it all, the bell tower looms, San Marco or Santa Maria del Fiore, its heavy bronze voice echoing across tiled roofs like a disoriented opera singer. The bell isn't just loud, it's your boss, your calendar, your version of a phone alarm with absolutely no snooze button. It rings for prayer, for work, for market, for curfew. Sometimes it rings just to make sure you're still afraid of time. And somehow, despite the spiritual undertones, it doesn't feel divine. It feels like bureaucracy in audio form. Historians still argue whether early Renaissance cities were more orderly because of these bells or simply more stressed. Some say the bells were liberating, marking a shared civic rhythm. Others think they were just loud, unavoidable bullhorns of guilt. You press on. The streets are cold, damp, and uneven. A sleeping dog eyes you suspiciously. Somewhere behind a window, a baby cries, jolted awake by the last bell toll. You sigh, because if you're awake, everyone should be awake. The city is waking in layers. The poor wake first always. Craftsmen, bakers, guards. They rise in the dark and shuffle through routines that smell like wet ash and old bread. Merchants rouse later, pausing to stretch and complain about backaches before even thinking about standing up. Nobles, they'll rise when the sun has properly climbed and the servants have already suffered. But you're on monk time, which means waking up when your body says please no, and your superior says God said yes. Back in your cloister, you light an oil lamp and stare at the frescoed wall. It shows the Annunciation. Mary looks serene. You look like a pillow fought back. You sit, you chant, you yawn during the Magnificat, and pray no one notices. This isn't just religion, it's timekeeping. Because before mechanical clocks arrived, the day wasn't divided by numbers. It was ruled by hours, not the kind you see on a watch, but chunks of light and dark named and holy. Matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline. A medieval mixtape of sleep disruption. No wonder people dreamed of angels. They were sleep-deprived. You're not just tired, you're chronically confused. The bells don't ring the same amount every season. Nonis might be at 3 p.m. in the summer or after lunch in the winter. Your body never knows. It just shuffles behind the noise, hoping for a nap. And the irony. Despite all the effort, the bells are barely accurate. They're rung by hand by a guy who probably overslept. You finish the morning office and trudge out to work. Whether you're illuminating manuscripts, baking flatbread, or selling eels, the city pulses to its own choppy, chime-driven rhythm. You think about going back to bed. You won't, not yet. But oh, how you'll cherish the second sleep. Don't worry, we'll get there. You shuffle back through the narrow streets, the kind that twist like someone designed them while half asleep, which frankly tracks with how most Renaissance Italians felt most of the time. The bells have finished tolling for prime, and now the world settles into that brief illusion of normalcy, where no one's screaming, praying, or banging a pot to be noticed. But sleep is still a distant, slippery hope. Because here's the thing, before clocks, people slept like confused cats. You didn't go to bed at 10 or wake up at 6. You went to bed when it was dark and quiet, unless your neighbor was still singing about lost love and olives under your window. You woke up when your bladder gave up or your bones couldn't stand the cold straw anymore, or some overzealous friar started chanting Dominus Vobiscum 5 doors down. In this pre-clock world, the very idea of a standard bedtime is absurd. Each person operates on a combination of seasonal guesswork, sun position guesstimation, and inherited family chaos. Your grandfather probably woke up at 2 a.m. to plow fields. Your cousin thinks staying up till dawn debating Aristotle is productive. Meanwhile, you just want a nap that doesn't end in confusion. Without clocks, people relied on sound, bells mostly, but also dogs, donkeys, the town drunk, or whatever large bird decided it was morning. Historians still argue whether this era was more in tune with nature or just in constant conflict with it. On the one hand, yes, people watched the stars and timed things to moon cycles. On the other, they sometimes mistook a cloudy afternoon for dusk and called it a day 4 hours early. In the city, sleep was even more chaotic. Candlelight was expensive. Oil lamps were better, but they smoked. You'd snuff out your only light just to save oil and then stumble into furniture for 20 minutes before giving up and going to bed. If you were lucky, your bed was a wooden frame with some ropes and a wool mattress. If not, it was a sack of hay and hope. But even falling asleep wasn't simple. You're not lying in a cozy bed with clean sheets and a podcast whispering you to dreamland. You're lying in your tunic, wrapped in a scratchy blanket, listening to your neighbor cough out what may or may not be the Black Death. The fire's gone cold, someone's donkey just brayed outside, and the alley reeks of onions, fish, and regret. Still, eventually you drift off, and then you wake up. Why? Because it's not morning, it's midnight-ish, and that's perfectly normal. You've entered the era of segmented sleep. That's right, 2 sleeps. A first sleep, then a period of wakefulness, usually an hour or 2. Then a second sleep. It wasn't insomnia, it was a feature. During that nighttime pause, people did everything, prayed, read, gossiped, stoked the fire, went outside to pee, pondered the meaning of dreams, or if the mood struck, engaged in holy marital reconciliation. That's right. Midnight was prime time for awkward romance under a crucifix. You roll over and open your eyes. It's dark. You sit up and light a small candle, hands fumbling with flint in the cold. You squint at the fresco above your bed, an angel with very judgmental eyebrows. You mutter a half prayer. You think about bread. Do you eat something maybe? A crust of yesterday's loaf? maybe a few olives if you're lucky. Food doesn't come in scheduled meals here. You eat when you're awake, which inconveniently is now. You nibble, you think, you sit with your thoughts for a while. They're strange, dreamy, a little slippery, like you haven't fully left sleep behind, but haven't quite returned either. And then, as naturally as you woke, you lie back down. Second sleep begins. No alarm, no guilt, just the body doing what it does best, napping in phases. You curl up tighter. The blanket smells like ash and lavender. Someone outside mutters in their sleep. A dog howls briefly. You drift off again. And when you wake this time, it's closer to what we'd call morning. The bells ring. The light is brighter. The pigeons are louder. You're not rested exactly, but you're functional. You throw your feet onto the cold stone floor, rub your eyes, and wonder how anything ever got invented before coffee. And spoiler, it didn't, but that didn't stop Renaissance Italians from trying. You're not even standing yet, and the bells are already judging you. Outside your window, Florence is alive with sound. Not music, not laughter, just bells. Bells for mass, bells for market, bells for your late sinner. They toll from every tower with the coordination of a town crier who drank too much mead and still insists on keeping everyone else on schedule. You try to sit up. Your back disagrees. The straw mattress beneath you has all the give of a marble slab, and your pillow, if you can call it that, is just a cloth bag stuffed with last season's disappointment. You groan. It echoes. You shuffle to the basin. Splash water on your face. It's cold, unnecessarily cold. You remind yourself that bathing regularly is a very modern luxury, and that most Renaissance Florentines considered face splashing to be the height of morning hygiene. You pat your cheeks dry with a towel that smells vaguely of garlic and ink. Then it hits you again, another bell. You flinch. This one's from the nearby Carmine Bell Tower, striking the hour for terse mid-morning prayers. You mutter a half-hearted amen while attempting to stretch your back into something that resembles human posture. You step into the street, and suddenly you're in the middle of it. Renaissance Italy's living alarm system. There's no gentle phone vibration, no chirping bird ringtone. Just the earth-shaking bong of a 2,000-pound bell, swinging from a stone tower built by people who thought subtlety was for heretics. Historians still argue whether Italians of this period found these bells reassuring or oppressive. Some claim the sonic order gave people a sense of unity. Others point to legal complaints and passive-aggressive poetry about never sleeping again. You dodge a cart, a baker yells. The butcher's dog barks like it's been personally wronged by the dawn, and overhead yet another bell begins its weary sermon. You look up. The campanile looms above beautiful and cruel. It catches the early sun throwing gold-tinted shadows down the street. You wonder how long it took to haul all that bronze up there, and how long before it tolls again. Each church has its own bell schedule. There's no universal timekeeping yet. Each tower rings when its keeper thinks it's right. Give or take a quarter hour a mead hangover or a philosophical debate about when noon actually begins. But the bells don't just signal time, they shape it. They're used to call meetings, declare curfews, warn of fires, announce weddings, proclaim deaths. Some bells have nicknames, others have reputations. There's the lazy bell, the cracked bell. The bell that once fell and killed a chicken, which is now a folk legend. And behind every bell, a human. You pass the foot of a tower and glance up. Somewhere high above a campanaro, the bell ringer is already sweating. He's been climbing narrow, dark stairs, since before sunrise, carrying tools, ropes, and the weight of civic responsibility. He doesn't get applause, he gets blisters. You think of the time he overslept. The entire neighborhood was 30 minutes late to everything. Some say that day felt like a vacation, others still haven't forgiven him. Back in your workshop because congratulations, you're now a mid-level artisan, you try to focus. But the bells don't stop. They mark each part of the day with holy precision and ungodly volume. You hammer, bong. You sketch, bong. You sigh, bong. It's not the sound itself, it's the authority. You can't argue with a bell. You can't ignore it without guilt. And you certainly can't hit snooze. So people learn to adapt, to organize life around the chimes, to measure their morning not in minutes but in bells. After third bell but before the soup bell. Around the time of the second market bell. Just after the loud one but before the annoying one. You hear it in conversations. How long did it take? 2 bells. Which bells? The big ones. It's both comforting and maddening. The bells keep the city alive, but never let it rest. You pause for lunch. It's not noon yet, technically, but your stomach doesn't care. You sit with bread, cheese, and olives. Across the courtyard, a group of apprentices eat in silence, their ears perked subconsciously, awaiting the next chime. And sure enough, bong. Everyone flinches. Then almost comically they all stand. Work resumes. The bell has spoken. You wonder for the briefest moment what it would be like to sleep without interruption. No bells, no matins. No one dragging you out of bed because St. Lawrence said so. But you shake the thought. That's just not how Renaissance Italy works. If time is a river, the bells are the stones that break it into 100 little splashes. You stand, stretch, and wait for the next one. You look up at the bell tower again, and this time you wonder who actually keeps those things ringing. Because it's not magic, it's not automatic. It's one guy sleep-deprived, underpaid, and probably nursing a bad knee, hauling himself up hundreds of stone steps every single day, to yank ropes and beat bronze like his soul depends on it. That's the campanaro, the bell ringer, possibly the most important, least glamorous job in the entire Renaissance city. You picture him now grumbling into his beard as he climbs the spiral staircase inside the Tower of Santa Croce. His lantern swings with each step. He's carrying a big iron key, a coil of rope, and the grim knowledge that if he misses his cue, an entire district will descend into chaos. Well, Renaissance chaos. More yelling, less structure fires. At the top there's wind, pigeons, dust, and a massive bronze bell suspended above a city still snoring into its sleeves. The campanaro lights another lantern, checks the sky, listens to the echo of distant chimes from rival towers, and begins. Pull, pause, swing, let it ring. The tower trembles, the city shifts. It's an odd kind of power to decide when a neighborhood wakes up or bows its head in prayer. To be invisible but essential. You're not a priest. You're not a noble. You're just the guy who rings the bell. But without you, nothing starts. Historians still argue whether the campanari followed strict civic schedules or rang by instinct. Some cities had written codes. Others trusted their bellmen to feel the time. It wasn't science, it was vibe-based timekeeping, which explains why Florentine time often felt like jazz, sometimes precise, sometimes offbeat, but always played loud. You try to imagine life as a campanaro. The hours are brutal. You wake before dawn, climb the tower ring, the bells for matins. Maybe go home for bread and beans, then come back for terce, sext, none, vespers, compline, repeat. Rain or shine feast day, or funeral the bells ring. Sometimes they chime joyfully, like at a wedding. Sometimes they toll solemnly, like when plague visits the neighborhood again. Sometimes they just clang for meetings, because no one knows how to organize Florentines without yelling or bells. Your hands grow calloused, your arms ache. Your sleep is a patchwork quilt of naps stolen between services. But there's pride in it. When your bell rings clean and strong across the rooftops, people nod in appreciation sometimes. Mostly they just mutter and roll over. But deep down they know you're keeping time alive. You've heard it said God made the world, but the bell ringer keeps it running. And here's the thing, the bell tower isn't just a workplace, it's a stage. Sometimes visitors climb up to admire the view. Lovers sneak kisses by candlelight. Thieves hide up here and count stolen coins. You've chased them all off, then rung a slightly smug bell for good measure. One time, during a storm, lightning hit the tower. It lit up like Judgment Day. You were up there soaking wet, gripping the rope with one hand and a crucifix with the other, ringing the emergency peal while praying for your eyebrows. It worked, mostly. Eventually, your knees go. Climbing the tower becomes a sacred ordeal. You teach an apprentice, some sullen kid with good arms and bad punctuality. He calls the ropes snakes and tries to ring the evening bell like he's starting a bar fight. You teach him patience, rhythm, respect. He learns slowly. Then one morning you oversleep. It's the first time in 23 years. The city's confused. Shopkeepers frown. Monks whisper. A group of bakers nearly riot over delayed dough times. The abbot sends someone to check if you've died. You haven't, you just had a dream about sleeping through the bells and then did. You laugh a little, then you climb the stairs again, slower now, but still climbing. Because even in a world starting to embrace clocks and gears and wheezing metal automata, the human bell ringer still matters. You ring, the city breathes, and in that moment, despite the aches, despite the pigeons, despite the apprentice, who still thinks it's funny to ring vespers half a beat early, you feel like a king. Not of gold, but of bronze. You're lying in your cot again, except it's not quite night. Not quite morning either. It's that awkward slice of darkness that monks know all too well, Matins hour. The time of day no sane person is conscious, but here you are groggily flailing for your sandals like a confused saint. The bell has rung. It always does. Like clockwork except without clocks. You sit up. Your robe smells like damp wool and humility. Your joints creak like old wood. Outside your cell you hear the other monks shuffling into the chapel. Someone sneezes in Latin. Someone else is already chanting under their breath, which feels aggressive. Matins is the first of the canonical hours, a holy interruption, designed specifically to remind you that sleep is temporary, but guilt is eternal. It's somewhere between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., depending on the season and the enthusiasm of the abbot. You drag yourself down the hallway, candle in hand. The wax drips like it knows you're suffering. The stones are cold. Your feet are colder. You wonder briefly if Saint Benedict ever stubbed his toe and just gave up for the night. You reach the chapel. It's dim, smoky, and full of barely awake monks, chanting like haunted Gregorian metronomes. You join in your voice a sleepy drone, blending with the others into something vaguely spiritual and unmistakably exhausted. Domine libia mea pries. O Lord, open my lips. You whisper it, hoping he also opens your eyes. Historians still argue whether Matins was spiritually invigorating or just holy sleep deprivation. Some say the midnight prayers helped monks feel closer to God. Others say it was closer to torture with incense. You kneel, Stand, sit, chant, repeat. Your mind wanders. You start counting candles. You consider faking a fainting spell, but remember Brother Hugo tried that once and still got assigned double psalms. After an hour or maybe 10, you're dismissed. You shuffle back to your cell, not fully awake, but no longer fully asleep. It's too early to eat, too late to get real sleep, but just early enough for your brain to wonder if this is what holiness actually feels like, or if you've just been up too long. You lie back down. This right here is where segmented sleep comes in. It's not just a peasant thing, monks perfected it. First sleep before matins. Second sleep the hopeful nap afterward. It's a medieval snooze button with incense. You curl up again, robe still wrapped around your knees, head back. On that glorified sack of hay, your mind drifts. You don't dream not yet, but you do wander through that hazy limbo between wake and sleep. You think about the Psalms, about Brother Alric's snoring, about how you really should have fixed that tear in your mattress last week. You drift off, and then of course you wake up, again. This time it's lauds, another bell, another shuffle, another whispered complaint about the timing of divine office. You trudge back to chapel, your second sleep interrupted by your second obligation. You chant, you kneel, you yawn so deeply you see angels. Back in your cell once more you lie down and sigh. It's not even breakfast. You're already tired of being tired. But there's a rhythm to it, a strange, reverent rhythm. You're not alone. Across the monastery, and in hundreds more, across Italy, men and women rise in the middle of the night, just like you, groggy, sore, half resentful but faithful, chanting in the dark, hoping God's still listening even when they sound like they're sleep mumbling. You glance at your window. The first blue of dawn begins to creep through the slats. Another day has started, and you've already been up. Twice. You're sitting on a wooden bench, trying to remember what century it is, and more importantly, what day. Your sleep has been carved into so many little pieces, it barely resembles rest. It's more like an ongoing conversation between your body and gravity, with both of them slowly losing patience. You stretch your legs, your knees pop. The sky outside is finally light enough to see the color of the laundry hanging across the alley, beige and darker beige. The baker downstairs is already shouting at his apprentice. A pigeon lands on the windowsill and stares at you like it knows your secrets. And through it all, one thought buzzes in your brain like a wasp stuck in a jar. Why do we sleep like this? Because here's the secret no one told you when you joined a Renaissance monastery, or a shoemaker's workshop, or a textile guild, or really any building that doesn't have proper insulation. Broken sleep is the norm. You live in the age of segmented sleep, not because it's trendy, not because a life coach suggested it on parchment, but because your environment gives you no other option. Between Bell's cold candle shortages, coughing neighbors, and the casual surprise of being jolted awake by nocturnal rats, or minor religious epiphanies, continuous sleep is a fantasy, so people learn to sleep in 2 shifts. First sleep-awaking period and second sleep. Historians still argue whether this was a conscious habit or just circumstantial behavior. Some believe people embraced this rhythm fully using the middle period for prayers, reading, or even low-stakes social visits. Others think people just did what they could with the darkness they were given. Either way, your sleep schedule now resembles a poorly organized relay race. You recall last night's gap between sleep 1 and 2. You sat up, poked at the dying embers, and nibbled on stale bread, while trying to remember if the psalm you mumbled earlier counted. or if you dreamt it. You watched the shadows shift on the wall and felt oddly calm. This is what they sometimes called the watching hour. A pocket of darkness when the world pauses and your thoughts get weirdly philosophical. You think about saints. You think about soup. You think about why your left foot always gets colder than your right. And then you lie back down. If you're lucky, second sleep wraps around you like a woolen fog and carries you off until sunrise. If you're not, you lie there blinking until the bell rings again, and you swear you'll never be rested again unless you come back as a cat in your next life. Out in the city, this two-part sleep pattern shapes everything. Shops open late. Morning markets don't really get going until people have yawned their way through a bowl of porridge and at least 3 muttered complaints. Even the fishmongers move like they've just escaped a very boring dream. You walk through the streets, now passing people who all have the same look, the dazed but determined stare of someone whose body knows it's technically awake, but emotionally isn't ready. You pass a merchant asleep at his stall, a scribe half-dozing over his manuscript, a washerwoman snoozing beside her bucket. No one's judged. This is just life, sleepy, fragmented, and powered mostly by inertia. You step into your workshop. The tools are cold. The floor is colder. You try to start working on a leather strap, but realize your hands are still stiff, from sleep or maybe from the complete lack of it. You yawn loudly. Brother Hugo nods in solidarity. Someone makes a joke about a third sleep. You all laugh nervously. There's a rhythm to this fractured day. Work in the morning, break in the afternoon. Sometimes you sneak a nap behind the workshop curtain. Sometimes you don't even pretend it's culturally accepted. No one calls it laziness. It's just the body rebelling with style. Later over lunch, you discuss dreams with your neighbor. He says he dreamt of a staircase made of cheese. You say nothing about your own dream, which involved St. Francis a mule and a really sarcastic goose. You both shrug. Dreams are part of the package. And so is the fact that you'll probably be awake again tonight at 2 a.m. staring at the ceiling, listening to someone snore through the Psalms. You step into the street just as the gears begin to turn literally. Across the piazza, up in the tower, something new groans to life. It clunks, it clicks, then it chimes. Once, twice, a deep mechanical toll. Steadier than any hand-pulled bell you've heard before. The city has a clock now. Not a water clock, not a sundial, a real one. A great hulking contraption of weights, levers, iron arms, and mysterious groaning noises. It doesn't just ring, it counts, publicly, loudly, and with exactly zero concern for how you feel about that. Welcome to the age of the clockwork city. Florence is one of the first, but not the last. Milan, Venice, Bologna. They're all adding these mechanical time tyrants to their skyline. Tower clocks, monumental architectural beasts built into churches and civic buildings alike, meant to do the unthinkable standardized time. You squint up at it. There's a huge painted face, just one hand pointing to numbers that don't match any you've used before. Is it noon 4 early? Late, the clock says one thing. Your body says another, and neither of them is in the mood to compromise. And that's the problem. These new machines aren't tuned to the rhythm of bells or bodies. They tick by their own logic, cold metal, impersonal. They don't care if it's still dark out, or if your second sleep didn't happen, or if your porridge needs 3 more minutes. They strike the hour because that's what gears do. No feelings, just teeth and torque. Historians still argue whether these early mechanical clocks were revolutionary or just glorified stress machines. Some hailed them as marvel's tools of divine order. Others saw them as oppressive symbols of a creeping rigidity that replaced God's time with man's ticking. You personally are undecided. On the one hand, it's impressive. You've seen the inside of the clock tower, huge gears turning like the slow digestion of a metal beast. The keeper, a quiet man with soot on his hands, winds the weights every few days. He calls it feeding the dragon. On the other hand, the dragon now wakes you up, whether you like it or not. You walk the market square, watching others check the tower face as if it speaks some truth only they can interpret. It rings out the third hour. Someone gasps they're late. A baker curses. A friar speeds up his walk. Time has become something you can lose, something you can be behind on. This is new. Before, time was flexible. You arrived around Vespers, left before the last bell promised to meet after sunset. Now the clock demands specifics. 8 sharp, 4 precisely. And if you miss it, that's your fault. You begin to notice it everywhere. Appointments, payments, shipments, sermons. They're being scheduled by clock time. We'll meet at the third hour, someone says, not based on sun or bell, but on that tower's cold iron voice. Even artisans are feeling the pressure. You pass a wool dyer who grumbles that he has to start measuring batches to the minute now because the buyer has a clock. You see a blacksmith checking a sand glass, compulsively muttering about customers with clocks and no patience. The shift is subtle, but real. You used to wake up when the rooster crowed. Now it's when the gears strike 6. You used to take breaks when your body ached. Now it's only after the clock groans 8 times. You used to nap when the sun was high. Now it's whenever the schedule says. The city is moving differently. Sharper, faster, jittery almost. Like everyone is listening for the next chime to tell them what to do. And you miss the bells. Sure, they were chaotic, sometimes late, sometimes early. Sometimes you couldn't tell if they were for mass or for lost sheep. But they were human, imperfect, lived in. This machine doesn't care that you didn't sleep last night. It just ticks and ticks and ticks. You pass under the tower again. You swear you can hear it breathing. Or maybe that's just your nerves. Later that evening, as the shadows stretch across the cobblestones and the clock rings out 9 solemn chimes, you wonder if anyone really asked for this, or if time, once caged in bronze, simply decided it would never sleep again, and neither would you. You're not a noble, not even close, which is why you're currently lying on a thin straw mattress tucked beneath a staircase that creaks every time someone breathes near it. The blanket over you is shared with a cousin. The air is shared with 2 chickens. And your dreams are frequently interrupted by the neighbor's nighttime sausage making. And yet somehow you sleep, mostly, because even in the heart of Renaissance Italy, where bells ring like judgment and clocks glare like disappointed fathers, everyone has to sleep sometime. And they do, rich and poor, artisan and monk, fishmonger and philosopher. The difference how, where, and how many pillows are involved. You roll over and sigh. The straw pokes your side. Again. The chickens shuffle. Someone outside yells Marco to no response. You're not surprised. Historians still debate how much sleep commoners actually got during this period. Some argue they were constantly sleep-deprived from hard labor. Others point to the flexible nature of their work. Fewer artificial constraints meant they could nap, snooze, pause, and doze throughout the day and night. You suspect the answer lies somewhere in the hay under your elbow. Sure, you don't sleep 8 straight hours. You sleep in fits, in shifts, in strategic bursts. A first sleep before the midnight market prep. A second sleep after hauling bread to the ovens. A third possibly illegal nap behind a cart while pretending to check inventory. But for the nobles, you hear them sometimes on the other side of the piazza, behind stone walls so thick they could muffle a divine trumpet. Feather beds, draped canopies, perfumed sheets, fireplaces that never go out, and servants who tuck them in with warm wine and whispering flattery. You've even caught glimpses a noblewoman reclining at midday, her slippers untouched by stone, a tiny dog snoring in a chair beside her, a young dandy in velvet yawning under a pergola at 10 a.m., claiming he's still emotionally recovering from a moonlit poetry duel. They sleep like sleep is a social performance. And in some ways it is. Among the wealthy, sleep becomes art, nap chambers, decorative sleeping caps, herbal sachets, even imported sleeping stones warmed near the hearth and tucked into foot blankets. You once heard a merchant boast that his wife refused to sleep without 2 lullabies and 3 readings from Boccaccio. Meanwhile, you're lucky if no one steps on your leg. You get up and stretch. The sun is out. You step onto the street, joining a procession of yawns, side-eyes, and slow-moving Florentines trying to look functional. A fish seller pours water on his face from a chipped bowl. A shoemaker blinks slowly, hammer in hand, clearly unsure if it's Monday or a dream. You make your way to the workshop. Your hands are stiff. Your neck clicks. You do the mental math of how many hours of real sleep you managed and come up with. 2, 3. Then you shrug. That's above average. Work starts. You don't talk about the sleep. You just cope. That's how it is here. Sleep isn't a topic. It's just something everyone quietly battles, like taxes or turnips. You hammer, sew, paint, stir, repeat. Somewhere in the late morning, a lull hits. That soft part of the day where sunlight lands warm and sideways across your tools, and you swear you could just close your eyes for 10 minutes. You do. You lean back on the bench just for a moment, and there it is again. Sleep. Quick, shallow, but real. The noble might spend an hour napping on velvet. You get 4 minutes under a leather apron. But for those 4 minutes, you are royalty. You've heard whispers, soft, amused murmurs in taverns and workshops, about a man who tried to control when he woke up. Not with bells, not with roosters, not even with a grumpy monk standing over him. No, this man built machines. You know his name. Everyone does. Leonardo. Yes, that Leonardo. Painter, thinker, dissector of cadavers, wearer of dramatic cloaks. And apparently the kind of guy who looked at a full night's sleep and said no thanks. You can almost picture him now, pacing his cluttered Florentine studio by candlelight, gesturing wildly at blueprints as apprentices pretend to understand what he's talking about. If I sleep in smaller chunks, he probably says, I can reclaim time stolen by dreams. Historians still argue whether Leonardo da Vinci truly practiced polyphasic sleep, a pattern where he allegedly slept in 20-minute increments spaced throughout the day and night. Some scholars doubt the logistics. Others point to scattered notes and half-legible diagrams suggesting he at least tried. What's certain is that he hated wasting time, so naturally he invented alarm clocks, crude ones sure, not digital or even clockwork, but ingenious in their own right. There's a design in his notebooks, an elaborate contraption involving a water jar suspended over a thin plate. As time passes, the jar empties, the weight shifts, and eventually the plate tips and drops something loud, like a ball. Or in one version, a small mechanical hammer that strikes a bell. Imagine being awoken, not by the sun or a bell tower, but by a precision splash engineered by the guy who painted the Mona Lisa. You lie back on your straw pallet and imagine your roof creaking open like a stage set. A rope tugs, a marble rolls down a track, a lever shifts, then clang, morning. Except you're not Leonardo. You're not rich, not famous, and you definitely don't have time to tinker with hydraulic timing systems just to rise at dawn. Still, the idea is oddly appealing. You begin to notice more talk of devices merchants ordering sand glasses, with custom measures of scholars discussing adjustable candle clocks that burn away lines on a wax stand to signal the hour. Even the monastery is rumored to have a new time bucket that fills with water, drop by drop tipping over when it's time for the next prayer. But let's be honest, most people still rely on the classic spells the human body and sheer panic. You step into your neighbor's home one morning and spot their version of an alarm, a piece of string tied from their wrist to a door handle. When the door opens with the sun, the pull wakes them. Ingenious, terrible. It clearly doesn't work. Then there's old Giulio. He sleeps with a stone in his hand. When he nods off too deeply, it drops. He wakes. He swears by it. You suspect he just likes carrying rocks, and you just rely on instinct and the anxiety of oversleeping your workshop duties. You'd love an alarm, but the only clock in your home is the one in your gut, and it's usually yelling about olives. Still, you dream of it, not just a better night's sleep, but a predictable wake-up. A gentle, trustworthy nudge, something human, something kind. You imagine a Leonardo-style device for yourself, a candle that burns through a string, releasing a pebble that falls into a tin plate. Or maybe a rooster with a tiny wooden mallet trained to peck you awake. You chuckle at the thought. Historians still can't agree whether Da Vinci's alarm concepts were meant to be practical or just playful mind exercises. But his notebooks are full of these little daydreams, ways to bend time, wrestle, sleep, stretch the hours like canvas. You fall asleep wondering what your life might be like. If someone did invent the snooze button, would you still rise for matins? Would you get fired for hitting 5 more minutes? Would Leonardo have slept through history? Probably not, but you might have. And honestly, that sounds like art. You wake to a knocking sound. Not divine thunder, not the creak of a bell tower, just knock, knock, knock. It's rhythmic, calculated, slightly annoyed. You sit up, look toward the window. A figure stands just outside, holding a long stick, tapping the shutters with the slow menace of someone who's absolutely done with your nonsense. It's the knocker-upper. And no, that's not a joke. That's his actual job. Before clocks in homes and long before phone alarms and sleepy muttering from Alexa, people hired other people to wake them up. Men with poles, women with pebbles, boys with hollow reeds who'd blow pulses of air through bedroom slats until the sleeper stirred or screamed. It's the Renaissance version of hitting snooze, except someone's literally standing outside your house, jabbing at your window like an impatient woodpecker. You swing your legs off the cot and open the shutters just a crack. The man nods once. No words. Just a small professional bow, then off he goes to the next window stick, tapping the cobblestones like a metronome with a grudge. Historians still argue whether these human alarm clocks were common across Italy or more of an English oddity that drifted south. But there's enough evidence casual mentions in Letters-town records, noting payments to suggest the practice existed in some form here, too. You've seen them at work before dawn, quietly stalking the sleeping city. Some carry staffs, some use small hammers. Some just toss pebbles against the shutters like suitors with a curfew. And no, they don't wait around to make sure you actually get up. That's your problem. You pull on your boots, still half asleep, muttering thanks to a man already 2 houses down and probably very tired of your whole family. The thing is, the knocker-upper isn't just a wake-up call. He's a symbol of how deeply people want to control time even when they don't have access to it. Because unless you're rich enough to own a personal timepiece, and let's face it, you rely on someone else to tell you when your day begins. Time is outsourced, distributed, delegated. The knocker-upper is your alarm, your responsibility, and your excuse, all rolled into one slightly damp man with a stick. You walk to the bakery. Your path crosses another early riser, an apprentice muttering about missed knocks. He swears his guy never showed. You nod sympathetically. You know what that means. His master will accuse him of sloth, and he'll spend the morning sweeping flour instead of shaping it. There's no room for missed wake-ups anymore. Not since the city began enforcing fines for tardiness. Not since customers started arriving by the hour instead of after sunrise. The stakes have changed, and with them the value of waking on time. You buy a roll. It's warm, which is more than you can say for your fingers. The baker, wiping sweat from his brow, says his knocker-upper uses a fishing rod, casts a pebble through the window, then reels the line back in. It's efficient, it's ridiculous, it works. You ask him if he ever sleeps in. Never, he says. I don't trust him. You walk away, chewing thoughtfully. At the docks, you see another method, a porter, using a horn to rouse an entire boarding crew. Blasts it once, twice. The men groan and stumble up. One of them flips the horn blower off. The blower smiles like he's just been tipped. The city is buzzing now, awake, bustling, alive. But you know it didn't happen naturally. It was coaxed, nudged, forced into wakefulness by 100 Knox calls and amateur percussion performances. It's easy to laugh at the idea, but deep down you get it. You've been that person waking with dread at the first clang of a morning bell, praying for one more moment of warmth, one more chance to turn over and pretend it's still night. And you've envied the nobility who get servants instead of sticks, lullabies instead of knocks, and the kind of mornings that unfold like rose petals. But you're a commoner, and commoners get woken up by a man with a pole and a face like he's seen too much. You reach your workshop. The shutters are open, the sun is up, and thanks to a man with a stick, you are too. You sit at your workbench, staring at the same knot in the wood you always stare at, when your brain is running behind schedule. The knot stares back, unimpressed. The clock tower has already struck the hour. Loud, clear, precise, and still your hands haven't moved. Your body knows it's supposed to be awake. It's supposed to be producing, cutting leather, stirring ink, spinning wool, something, anything. But your body also knows something the clock doesn't. You're still tired. This is what happens when civic time clashes with body time. Once upon a time, you lived by light, by temperature, by birdsong, by the feel of the sun warming your back. But now you live by gears, by bells, by that smug metal hand creeping across the clock tower, dividing your day into manageable little slices of productivity. The problem, your internal clock didn't get the memo. You're groggy in the morning, even if the bell says it's the 3rd hour. You hit your stride around the 7th hour just in time for the abbot to declare it's time for vespers and tell everyone to wind down. And at night, when your brain finally feels sharp again, curfew. Candle out. Dreams or else. Historians still argue whether this disconnect was noticed at the time. Some say Renaissance thinkers embraced mechanical time with open arms. Others believe there was an ongoing quiet resistance, a fatigue not of the body but of the soul being expected, to march to the beat of a clock instead of a heart. You feel it, especially in the middle of the day when the sun is high, the market buzzes, and your mind begins to fog. Your body says nap. Your schedule says invoice 3 more loaves and count your lira. You try to split the difference. You pretend to take stock of supplies, really just code for leaning against a sack of grain with your eyes half shut. You mutter about calculation and no one questions you, mostly because they're also playing this game. Every shopkeeper, every scribe, every apprentice is secretly building in micro rests between the mechanical obligations. Even the nobility aren't immune. You've seen them at court, glassy-eyed, swaying slightly, nodding at petitions they clearly aren't hearing. Some have learned to speak in time code. Let's meet after the 6th bell is really. Once I've had a biscuit and a discreet doze. The clock, though, keeps ticking, unforgiving, smooth, silent between the chimes. You can't bribe it, can't flatter it. It doesn't care if you're off today. It doesn't care if your child was sick last night, or your knees are sore, or the sermon ran long. Time now is something you follow, not something you feel. You glance at your neighbor Enzo. He's snoring into a bolt of linen. You gently tap the bench. He startles, blinks, thanks you with a sheepish nod. You wonder briefly if animals ever feel this way. If a dog ever thinks, ugh, another sunrise already. If chickens resent the rooster for yelling too early. Probably not, but you do. You long for the old days, not because they were better, but because they were yours. You decided when to rest, when to rise, or at least your body did. And your body, while not always wise, had a kind of honesty the clock doesn't. You scratch behind your ear, yawn, pour water into a bowl, stare into it like a philosopher who's been up too long. The sun is slipping, the bell will toll again soon. You're not ready, but you move anyway, because while your body might resist, your city won't wait. And if there's one thing worse than being exhausted in a world run by clocks, it's being late in a world that's keeping score. You're supposed to be working, but right now you're asleep in the corner behind a stack of unfinished inventory, drooling slightly onto a piece of parchment you were meant to copy. Welcome to the least glamorous Renaissance tradition, napping on the job and hoping nobody notices. The room is warm. The ink smells vaguely metallic. The hourglass on the table has long since emptied, and no one bothered to flip it. You were reading about St. Lawrence got as far as the bit with the grill, and then your head slumped sideways like a marionette that lost the will to be holy. And the thing is, this is normal. It's not encouraged, of course. No master shouts great job passing out during the midday devotions. But you're not the only one doing it. Everyone's tired. Everyone's faking focus. Everyone's internal monologue sounds like, if I keep my eyes mostly open and occasionally nod, maybe this counts as productivity. Monks have done it. Scribes have done it. Guards on night watch, absolutely. There are even town records of fines issued to men who were supposed to be ringing bells at night, but were instead discovered asleep atop the roof like a bundle of laundry. You snap back awake when your forehead hits the corner of the desk. There's a smudge on your face. You hope it's ink. Historians still argue whether workplace drowsiness was seen as moral failure or just human nature. Some monastic rules punished sloth harshly, especially when it interfered with prayer. Others recognized that asking someone to chant at 3 a.m. and transcribe psalms for 10 hours was, Perhaps a bit much. You shuffle your notes, stretch, glance around. Brother Hugo is blinking too slowly. Sister Lucia across the courtyard is definitely asleep behind the herb cart. Even the abbot just yawned, coughed to cover it, and adjusted his posture with the urgency of a man who's absolutely not dozing through the book of Job again. In some trades, the naps are strategic. Bakers grab 20 minutes while the dough rises. Shepherds snooze in the grass while the flock grunts along. Textile workers lean into the loom eyes closed, dreaming of thread counts and escape. Some even build napping into the schedule siesta style, though they never call it that. It's more like afternoon contemplation or digestive stillness. Or my back hurt, so I sat, and now I'm unconscious. You try to write again. The letters wobble. You blink. Try again. Nope. You dip your fingers into the basin. Cold water. You splash your face. Better, temporarily. Still the clock looms. It's not just a physical thing anymore. It's cultural. The pressure to be alert, to stay on task, to outperform the guy next to you is growing. More trade, more deadlines, more nobles demanding precise orders, and artisans grumbling about being turned into machines. But your body, it's still medieval. It still wants to sleep in 2 parts, or 3, or just once uninterrupted, without bells or anxiety. You think about Saint Benedict's rule, ora et labora, pray and work. He never said don't nap. So you do. Not now, of course. You're technically upright. But later, after Vespers, you'll lie down in the shadow of the courtyard wall. Just 20 minutes. No bell, no judgment. You look around again. Someone's snoring. It's Brother Matteo, face down on a pile of scrolls. One foot twitching like he's chasing dreams through scripture. He'll wake up in 5 minutes, say amen, and pretend it was a meditation. You respect it. You finally stand, stretch your back with a grimace, and return to your task. This time the pen stays in your hand, the line stays steady, but deep down you know, that bench is calling, softly, sweetly, like a lullaby sung in Latin by a choir of overworked scribes. You wake up cranky. Not the kind of cranky that comes with drama and door slamming, but the deep soul-settling grumpiness that settles into your joints before your eyes even open. It's baked into your shoulders. It sits behind your eyeballs. It's not personal, it's matutinal. You are now officially an early morning Renaissance grump. You grope around for your shoes. One is damp. You decide not to ask why. You mutter something unholy about the rooster and immediately consider repenting for it. Then you hear Brother Alric singing again. Of course he's already up. Of course he's cheerful. He's the kind of person who says things like, "Isn't dawn glorious?" while you're still trying to decide if putting on trousers is worth the effort. You're considering faking an illness just to sleep 2 more hours when the bell tolls again. You groan. It's the hurry-up bell, not the main event, just the passive-aggressive chime that says, "I see you're still lying down, and I disapprove." You stand. Your knees pop like bad kindling. You shuffle out into the street, bleary-eyed, joining the rest of the city's reluctant workforce. The market is beginning to breathe stalls, creaking open baskets being thumped down vendors. Blinking into the morning like stunned owls, you pass a fishmonger yelling about freshness with a voice that sounds like it's been smoking since 1350. His assistant, a boy of maybe 12, is leaning against a barrel, clearly asleep with his eyes open. You nod, respect. Historians still argue whether Renaissance city dwellers were naturally morning people or just pressured into becoming them. The bells said rise. The markets said rise. The fact that bread goes stale by noon said rise. But did anyone want to? That's a more philosophical question. You suspect not. You pass an olive vendor swatting pigeons with a ladle, a butcher sharpening knives while humming a hymn in the wrong key, a grocer chasing a dog away from a fig cart with the resigned energy of someone who knows it's going to happen again tomorrow. Everything about the morning is slightly wrong. The fruit is unwashed, the coins are miscounted, the wood under your feet feels colder than usual, and you've yawned so many times your jaw clicks. There's a myth that mornings in the Renaissance were beautiful and tranquil, that the dew glistened, the bells chimed like angels, and everyone rose with purpose. But you know the truth. The dew was cold, the bells were loud, and everyone rose with the quiet, murderous conviction of people forced out of their dreams by someone else's schedule. Still, somehow the market does come to life, eventually, not because people are ready, but because they have to be. Bread won't sell itself, chickens won't slaughter themselves. And if you're late again, the master mason will dock your pay and call you a sluggard in front of the entire guild hall. So you fake it. You smile at a neighbor, you say buongiorno with your mouth, while your eyes scream go away. You slap your cheeks, you bite a piece of dried fig and pretend it's breakfast. And eventually your body catches up, slowly. Like an ox hauling a cart of regrets. By mid-morning you're human again. But in that brutal hour after waking, when your brain is soup and your feet forget how cobblestones work, you are not a man or a woman or a member of the most serene republic. You are a walking complaint, and you are not alone. The early morning grump is a shared cultural identity. The man in line behind you at the bakery mutters about the bread being late. The girl next to you sighs as her boss yells about stall alignment. Even Brother Alric, yes, that Alric finally drops his cheer and groans as he spills goat milk on his robe. You raise your fig in salute. He nods. You are comrades now, united in sleep deprivation, divided by bell towers. You don't remember sitting down. 1 minute you were patching a tear in a sack of lentils. The next your eyes flutter open to sunlight birdsong and the gentle realization that you've just taken a nap on a pile of beans and nobody cares. Because here in Renaissance Italy, napping in broad daylight isn't shameful, it's civic sanity. Welcome to the golden hour of the mezzogiorno pause, the midday hush, the sacred siesta. The bells have tolled for sext. The sun is perched high and judgmental in the sky, and even the most energetic fishmongers have surrendered to the heat. The market stalls are half covered. Tools are laid down. Heads bow not in prayer this time, but in sleep. You rise, stretch, and take a stroll through a city turned momentarily horizontal. A cobbler naps behind his table, mouth open dreams, no doubt filled with perfectly symmetrical souls. 2 washerwomen slump beneath a fig tree, faces tilted toward the breeze buckets forgotten. A monk leans against a cloister pillar, snoring so softly it might count as chanting. And no one scolds, no one whispers, no one says, "Get up, slacker." Historians still debate whether siestas were formalized or simply tolerated out of practicality. Either way, by the 15th century, cities like Florence and Siena had developed an unspoken agreement with the sun: we work before we rest, during we complain after. Because when the Mediterranean heat hits its peak, and every alley feels like a slow-cooking oven of cobblestone, and regret, what else are you supposed to do? You sit beneath a loggia, sharing a piece of fruit with a friend. Neither of you speaks. There's nothing to say. The silence itself is delicious. Nearby, a stray cat has draped itself like melted wax across a windowsill. You briefly envy it, then you realize you're already living the cat dream. This is the closest thing to freedom you get all day. In homes, shutters close, curtains draw, floors cool, bread is covered, wine is sipped, and the weight of wakefulness lifts just enough for a short escape. It's not laziness, it's resistance. You close your eyes again, not fully asleep, just hovering in that middle place where thoughts drift like dust motes and time forgets to tick. And somewhere in the background, a tiny voice inside you whispers, "This is why clocks will never win." Because no matter how loudly they chime, no matter how tightly they slice the day into decimal pieces of industry, they can't touch the heat. They can't outring a nap. Even the clock tower, that smug overlord of schedules, seems to pause in this hour. Its gears still turn, but the chimes feel distant, almost apologetic. You feel a breeze. A basket rolls by, nudged by a lazy dog. A child giggles from behind a shutter. Everything slows, and for once time obeys. Not the mechanical kind, but the human kind, the one tied to hunger and sun and instinct. The kind of time that says, "Now we rest." You stand eventually. No bell orders it. No task demands it. You're simply ready. Refreshed, sort of. Still sleepy, but less angry about it. You walk back toward your workbench. The heat hasn't broken, but neither have you. You sit up with a start. It's dark. Not midnight, not yet, but deep enough into the evening that the world feels soft at the edges, like it's been gently smudged with charcoal. The hearth embers glow low. Your hands are cold. Your head still heavy from the day's nap. You weren't supposed to fall asleep again, but the bread was warm, the wine was stronger than usual, and the candlelight flickered just right. Now here you are, fully awake, heart tapping out a confused rhythm in your chest. And you are not alone, because this is the other night, the one between sleeps. This in-between time, sometime between the 9th bell and matins, is when things get strange. And oddly, busy. You step outside and the city is hushed, yes, but not still. Across the way, a window glows. A silhouette moves within. A man reading, a woman mending, someone lighting a second candle. Down the alley, a baker walks with slow purpose, preparing tomorrow's loaves. Farther along, a friar tends to a garden by moonlight. You hear laughter, quiet, not joyful exactly, but familiar. The kind that floats between lovers or siblings over shared bread and whispered nonsense. This hour belongs to the watchers, the thinkers, the dream interpreters, the mid-sleep meditators who rise not from duty but from something else, instinct maybe, or habit, or curiosity. Historians still debate whether this wakeful period common throughout pre-industrial Europe was practical, mystical, or simply the result of cold floors and bad beds. Some point to prayer guides designed specifically for the midnight vigil. Others suggest it was a time to snack and whisper and rekindle coals. You believe all of it, because right now you're doing all of it. You chew on a bit of bread left from supper. You tiptoe around the cat sleeping in the doorway. You sit by the fire and add a stick, watching it crackle back to life with the enthusiasm of a bored angel. Then you think, not productively, not with purpose, just think about your work, your day, the way Brother Hugo laughed at that ridiculous poem about snoring saints, the way the olive oil tasted just a bit off, the way the stars look like little holes poked in the fabric of heaven. You don't talk, there's no one to talk to. Or perhaps, more accurately, there are others. You just can't see them. The city is full of them, people like you, half awake, padding around kitchens and chapels and workshops, in their nightclothes staring out into the dark like it holds answers they forgot the questions for. And then, of course, the other things stir, the stories. This is also the hour when old women whisper about witches riding the wind, when men claim to hear demons scratching at the shutters, when a baby's cry at midnight is met with a quick prayer and a hand pressed over the child's heart. You smile because even you aren't immune. Just last week you dreamt of a black dog in a field of teeth, and Sister Lucia said that meant an unresolved debt or a need for garlic. You put garlic under your pillow that night. Did it work? You'll never know, but you slept. Tonight, though, you are simply alert, not panicked, not tired, just caught between two halves of sleep and letting your mind drift like a leaf on a slow river. You return to bed eventually, not because a bell tells you to, but because your body leans that way, like a sunflower folding into itself after dusk. You lie down, pull the blanket close, close your eyes. Second sleep will come, but first a little more thinking. And maybe, if you're lucky, a dream that makes just enough sense to be meaningful and just enough nonsense to be entertaining. You open your eyes sometime after sunrise. There is no bell, no knock, no rooster, just warmth, sunlight pooling across embroidered sheets, the faint scent of lavender and beeswax drifting through silk curtains, a servant's footsteps somewhere in the background, soft practiced, perfectly ignorable. You, dear sleeper, are now nobility, or at least you're living like one for a day. And this finally is what it feels like to wake up not from duty, but from choice. Historians still debate how much actual leisure Renaissance elites enjoyed. Some claim their days were meticulously scheduled appointments, politics commissions. Others suggest their schedules began with breakfast in bed and ended with moonlit poetry and someone else doing the laundry. Based on your current situation, you're going with the latter. You stretch beneath layers of imported linens. The mattress beneath you is stuffed with feathers, real feathers. Goose, probably, not hay, not rags. And no one's foot has been on this bed but yours. The room glows with morning. A servant silently draws open the curtains. Another places a silver tray near your elbow. Bread, cheese, dried fruit, and something warm in a delicate ceramic cup. You take a sip. It's wine, breakfast wine, because of course it is. You're not late for anything. Nothing starts until you arrive. You could bathe, you could write, you could have your hair braided while a musician quietly plays the lute in the corner. Or you could roll over and go back to sleep. And that's entirely acceptable, because among the nobility waking slowly is not just tolerated, it's cultivated, refined. They've turned sloth into ritual. You hear someone reciting lines from Petrarch in the next room. Light, flirty, incomplete. A woman laughs, someone sneezes, no one rushes. Downstairs, the household staff has been up for hours. The baker, the maid, the stable boy, all fully functioning. But upstairs, time is more like suggestion than rule. You eventually sit up. A servant helps you dress, not because you can't, but because bending over is something best left to others. You are laced into something stiff and decorative, or wrapped in robes designed to impress at breakfast. Not that you'll see anyone important before noon. Important people are still in bed, as you should be. You wander the corridor. The walls are cool marble. Tapestries flutter with every breath of air. You pass an open room where a nobleman is sleeping. Face down on a divan, a half-finished letter to a bishop still clutched in one hand. A servant adjusts his pillow, then tiptoes away. You move outside to a courtyard. The breeze smells like lemons and dust. A child chases a dog lazily across the stones. A parrot in a cage says something in bad Latin. You sit on a bench and close your eyes, not to nap, just to rest. Again, no bells interrupt, no clock demands. Even the cathedral across town seems muted, its chimes somehow less urgent from this angle. This, you think, is the real snooze button. Not a machine, not a bell, but power. You don't have to wake up, which means you can decide when you do and how. The rest of the city moves on a schedule. You move on a whim, and yet you wonder. Because even in this perfect sleep palace, there's a strange sense of dislocation. You don't know what time it is, you don't need to, but a small, curious voice in the back of your head still whispers, "Shouldn't we be doing something?" That's the paradox of privilege. You've escaped the tyranny of bells, but now you drift through time without anchors. You don't sleep better, you just sleep without consequence. And sometimes, strangely, you miss consequence. You lie back on the bench, the sun warms your face. Maybe you'll nap again, or maybe you'll rise in 10 minutes and decide it's time for music. Whatever you choose, it will be accepted, even admired, because in this world, waking up isn't about function, it's about aesthetic. And you're sleeping beautifully. You jolt upright to the clang of a factory bell. Not a church bell, not a hand-wrung tower tone with character and rust. This is something else, entirely metallic, regular, merciless. It rings 5 times, then again, then once more for emphasis, like it's daring you to ignore it. Welcome to the future. You stumble outside and the city is different. Not overnight, but unmistakably, unignorably changed. There's still bread, still, carts still gossip, and pigeons, but now there are schedules. Rigid, printed, regulated schedules. This is no longer a city ruled by bells that float through the day, like half-remembered songs. This is a machine, and every person in it is now a gear. You pass by a weaving workshop. Inside the looms clatter in perfect unison, driven not by rhythm, but by a bell that rings every 2 hours to mark break, start, stop lunch. The weavers don't chat, they don't pause, they operate. You pass a guild hall. A clerk adjusts a weight-driven wall clock and scowls when it's off by 4 minutes. A master shouts about lost labor. A boy mutters, "Time is money," which is both a punchline and a prophecy. The change didn't start with factories. It started with precision. Once the tower clocks improved, adding escapements, refining gears, time stopped being a suggestion and became a measurement. Governments standardized hours. Workplaces enforced start times. Watches became status symbols, then expectations. And then slowly but surely, the snooze button died. Historians still argue whether this shift was liberation or oppression. Was regular timekeeping a marvel of civic order or a slow erosion of human rhythm? Some praise it as progress, others call it colonization of the soul. You feel it in your bones. Gone are the second sleeps. Gone are the midnight musings and the gentle drift back into rest. Now if you wake in the night, you panic, is it time? Did you miss it? Is the train already gone? You scramble for confirmation, not comfort. In the square, a new invention arrives. A portable watch wound each morning, checked with obsessive reverence. Its owner checks it, frowns, adjusts his gait. Time no longer flows, it pulses. Your friend tells you his master docked him half a lira for arriving 4 minutes late. Not late for sext, or after the 5th bell 4 minutes late. As if those minutes have a moral weight now, and the city itself begins to shift in tone. No more lazy afternoon stalls. No more merchants humming while they wait for the next bell. Markets now open and close on the dot. Rest becomes regulated. Naps are frowned upon. Efficiency becomes the new virtue. Idleness, once a daily inevitability, is now a failing. You catch yourself watching the sun, not for warmth, but to see if it matches the clock. It doesn't. It never quite does. Even nature is losing its vote. You pause on a bench and remember the old rhythms. First sleep, the waking hour, second sleep, siesta, the long evenings that stretched like honey over a loaf of bread, all replaced by standard hours, fluorescent time cards, and a rising guilt about slowing down. The irony, people still complain about being tired. They still long for rest. But now that rest must be scheduled, justified, earned. You can't nap, you're on the clock. You can't sleep in, you'll miss the tram. You can't dream, you'll lose your place. You sit with an old man who remembers when the clock tower was just decorative. He tells you used to be time walked beside us. Now it drags us like a mule cart. You nod, you feel it. Your candle at home is half used. Your watch ticks. You're due somewhere in exactly 17 minutes. And all you want to do is close your eyes and drift. But even that now feels like rebellion. Because when time becomes a tyrant, sleep becomes revolution. You lie in bed staring at the ceiling. Your room is quiet. The streets outside are calm. No bells, no shouting. No clattering carts or yapping dogs. Just the soft tick-tick-tick of the little clock on your table. A gentle, persistent reminder that even now, even in sleep, you're on someone's schedule. The alarm is already set. You rolled over 3 times before finally admitting it. The snooze button doesn't help anymore. It just delays the inevitable. You have to get up. And yet you don't move. Not yet. Because this brief moment in the dark is the closest thing you have to freedom. You think about the Renaissance again. About the monks and merchants, the apprentices, the friars, the farmers who rose and fell with the rhythm of bells. The segmented sleepers, the nappers, the watchers in the night. And then you think about now, where sleep is measured in efficiency, where you're told to optimize your rest, where your dreams are scheduled between 2 iPhone alarms and a morning meeting, where a late morning is a failure, not a pleasure. You miss something you never had, a time when rest was sacred, not in the productivity sense, but in the human sense. When sleep wasn't a pause in the day, but a part of living. A time when waking slowly wasn't laziness, it was just how people worked. You remember the knocker-upper and his tapping stick, the snoozing fishmonger in the alley, the noble wrapped in silks declaring that he would not rise before the 3rd poem of the morning. And you realize they were all just trying to find a rhythm, not beat the clock, just exist. You sit up. The modern alarm blinks, 6:59. In a moment it will scream. Your day will begin. You'll dress, work, check your watch 20 times. Miss your own instincts. Forget to nap. Apologize for yawning. But right now, for this breath, this minute, you reclaim the right to not rise. Not just yet. You lie back down and close your eyes. And maybe in that soft darkness, you dream of bells, not the cold clang of obligation, but the warm, imperfect tones of a monastery tower at dawn. A sound that doesn't jolt but invites. A call not to hustle but to wake gently. And you wonder in that moment, what if the Renaissance had pressed snooze just a little harder? Maybe we'd all still be dreaming. In word count 171. Wind down final 300 words. You're lying still now. The day's noise has passed. The bells are quiet. The clocks have gone to sleep, ticking softly in distant rooms, losing their urgency with each passing moment. There's nothing left to chase. Your breathing slows, your body sinks. The mattress beneath you, whether straw or spring, becomes a boat floating on a river of silence, and it carries you slowly, gently away from the factories, the guild halls, the towers that tried to hold time in their grasp. You are no longer part of the schedule. You are drifting through moonlight streets where bakers snore beside their ovens, through candlelit cells where monks dream of saints, through noble bedrooms where silk rustles against skin warmed by sleep. And in all those places, one thing remains the same. We all need rest, not the kind measured in productivity or tracked by apps, but real, honest rest, the kind our ancestors took between bells, between shifts, between one breath and the next. You hear a bell far away. It's not ringing for you, not anymore, so you let go of the ticking, of the to-do list, of the little voice that says you haven't earned this. You have, you always have. And now the world fades soft, warm, safe. Close your eyes. Dream like it's still the 1400s, and let time at last wait for you. End of script, sweet dreams.